There's a phrase you've heard your whole life: nature abhors a vacuum. It sounds almost mythic, like emptiness itself somehow offends the universe, like the cosmos is a fussy librarian who can't stand an empty shelf. But here's the thing nobody really tells you. We figured out 400 years ago that the phrase is wrong. A vacuum doesn't suck. It never has. The atmosphere pushes. Pressure gradients move matter. Diffusion equalizes concentrations. The vacuum is innocent. The atmosphere is heavy. That's the entire trick. And yet, and this is what I want you to feel for the next 40-something minutes, that one tiny correction might unlock something about you that you've never had a name for. Because while nature doesn't hate empty space, something else seems to. Your mind, my mind, the collective mind. We can't sit still in a blank for more than about 30 seconds before we start filling it with something. Memory, fear, a theory, a myth, a rumor we half remember from a podcast, a story so satisfying it stops feeling like a guess and starts feeling like the answer. Tonight on the patio, we're asking why. Why does the unknown feel so unbearable? Why does the first explanation to arrive, at a tragedy, at a strange light in the sky, at a friend who suddenly stopped texting back, almost always win, even when it's wrong? And what would it look like to learn the discipline of leaving the chair empty a little longer? I'm Chris. I've been working on something I call the Eden hypothesis, a framework for understanding the moment unity collapses into form, the moment possibility becomes one specific thing. And I think the old phrase, nature abhors a vacuum, is one of the most accidentally accurate misquotes in human history. Not about nature, about us. Lily, Charlie, and Dr. Vega are at the table tonight. 5 chapters. One question with very long roots. What really fills the blank? A small note before we sit down. We'll touch psychology, neuroscience, and a little physics in places. None of this is professional advice, medical, mental health, or otherwise. We're 3 friends and one occasionally correct astrophysicist talking through ideas on a patio. If anything we say lands close to something you're actually carrying, please bring it to a real human in your real life who's qualified to help. That's our standing rule. Pull up a chair. The string lights are on. Let's talk about the oldest fear humans have, the fear of nothing. Chapter 1. We have to start where the phrase started, and where the phrase actually broke. For 2,000 years, philosophers from Aristotle forward took it for granted that emptiness itself was unstable. Horror vacui, nature's horror of the void. Then the 17th century happened, and a few stubborn experimenters with mercury, tubes, and a pair of metal hemispheres did something uncomfortable for the philosophers. They proved emptiness was fine. The drama was happening on the other side of the wall. So in this first chapter, the patio walks back the phrase, gets it right, and then asks the question that sets up the whole episode. If the universe was never afraid of empty space, who is?
Right then. So here's where I want to start, because this story is older than people give it credit for. Aristotle, who frankly got a lot of things wrong, bless him, wrote that nature would not permit a void. And for almost 2,000 years, that idea sat in the cellar of Western thought, like a jar of preserves nobody wanted to open. Horror vacui. The universe, we were told, hated nothing, couldn't tolerate it, would do anything to prevent it.
Hang on, Lil. Was that a metaphor? Or did they actually mean it literally?
Oh, they meant it, love. Properly meant it. They thought the cosmos had something almost like a moral preference against emptiness. Which is sweet, isn't it, when you think about it? The whole universe described as a sort of well-meaning aunt who can't bear a blank wall.
Actually, and I'm sorry, I have to do this in chapter 1, it's tradition. It's worse than that. Aristotle's argument wasn't just aesthetic, it was physical. He genuinely believed motion required a medium, so a vacuum would be metaphysically impossible, because nothing could move through it. The whole edifice was wrong, but it was internally consistent, which is the most dangerous kind of wrong.
Right. So what changed?
Torricelli, 1643. He fills a glass tube with mercury, inverts it into a dish of mercury, and instead of the tube emptying, which Aristotle would have predicted, the mercury column stops at about 76 centimeters. There's a gap above it. A tiny, beautiful, scientifically impossible, according to Aristotle, gap. And Torricelli does the brave thing. He says, that gap is empty. The atmosphere is holding the column up. Not the vacuum being afraid, the atmosphere being heavy.
And then the Germans get involved, which is when it gets theatrical.
Otto von Guericke. He invents the hemispheres around 1654. But the demonstration that actually gets him remembered, the one with the famous horse count, is 1656 in Magdeburg, his hometown. 16 horses, 2 teams of 8, pulling in opposite directions. Couldn't pry the hemispheres apart because there was no air pushing back from inside, and the entire weight of the atmosphere was pressing them together from outside.
Wait, I always heard it as one show with 30 horses.
That's the Regensburg version, also real, slightly earlier, slightly fuzzier in the records. The popular memory mashes them into one event. Pedants like me have to keep them separate, or we don't sleep.
That's brilliant. So nature wasn't holding them together at all. The sky was.
Exactly that. The sky was. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. The vacuum isn't hungry. The atmosphere is heavy.
Which is the line we should put on a t-shirt, frankly.
Charlie, would you wear that t-shirt?
I'd wear it on assignment, yeah. Photographers love a slogan tee.
I might get you one for your birthday then.
Cheers, Lil. That's nice of you.
Oh my God.
What?
Nothing. I just enjoy watching this in real time, that's all. Carry on.
Okay, so help me with this then. If the old idea was wrong, if vacuums don't actually pull, why does the phrase still feel right? Like every time someone leaves a meeting and someone else fills the silence, we say, nature abhors a vacuum, and everyone nods. It feels true even when the physics says no.
Because the phrase isn't really about physics anymore. It hasn't been for centuries. It survived because it describes something we recognize in ourselves. The phrase migrated. It started out as a claim about matter, and somewhere along the way, we quietly relocated it into a claim about minds and societies and conversations. And in that domain, well, in that domain it's a much harder phrase to dismiss.
Some researchers speculate it migrated because the metaphor was more accurate about consciousness than it ever was about physics. The universe never minded a gap. We mind, profoundly.
So we kept the wrong physics because it was the right psychology.
That's the cleanest way I've heard anyone put it, yes.
And the question that breaks the chapter open, and we'll come back to this, I promise, is whether what's happening in your nervous system when you can't tolerate an unanswered question is structurally similar to what's happening when air rushes into a low-pressure region. Not identical, not literally the same physics, but the same shape, a gradient, a pressure, a pathway, a movement toward equalization.
That's a big claim, Lil.
It is, and we're not making it tonight, not as a fact. We're holding it up to the light. That's what the patio's for.
Mainstream physics doesn't agree that minds and atmospheres obey the same laws. They don't. But here's the thought experiment. What if both of them are just specific instances of a more general pattern? Systems under gradient pressure resolve through available pathways. Atmospheres do that with air. Minds do that with stories.
And if that's right, even as a metaphor, then the universe was never afraid of emptiness. We were. We are. And the rest of this episode is about what we do because of that fear.
Which is a much better hook than Aristotle was wrong about jars.
Mate, that's the whole episode in one line. Chris, are you taking notes?
Chapter 2. Now we widen the lens. Because if pressure gradients aren't the whole story, and they aren't, what is the rule? In this chapter, the patio walks through 3 other places where nature appears to fill something. Diffusion in a glass of water, vacant niches in an ecosystem, and the strangely populated emptiness physicists call the quantum vacuum. And in each of them, we find the same correction. Nothing fills with anything. Things fill with what the structure allows, which sets up the human side, because the question we're sneaking up on is, what does the structure of consciousness allow into a blank?
I want to start this one with a kitchen experiment because everyone listening has done it. Drop a tea bag into hot water. Don't stir, just watch.
Yeah, and the color just sort of unspools into the water. Slowly. Like ink in a glass.
And nobody's pushing it, are they? Nobody's telling the tea molecules where to go. They simply move from where there are a lot of them, packed inside the bag, to where there are fewer of them. That's diffusion. Not magic. Not intention. A gradient resolving through a permeable membrane.
And critically, the tea doesn't fill the water with anything. It fills it with tea. The structure of what's available determines what arrives.
Which seems obvious when you say it about tea.
It is obvious when you say it about tea. It stops being obvious the moment we start talking about ecosystems.
Go on, Vega.
So in ecology, there's this concept called a vacant niche. You'll hear people say a species filled an ecological vacuum after, say, a mass extinction. It sounds neat. It sounds almost narrative. But what's actually happening is the constraint changed. Predators left, competitors died, resources opened up. And whichever lineages happened to have the right traits to exploit the new constraint structure diversified into those roles. We call it adaptive radiation. The classic case is Darwin's finches in the Galapagos.
Different beaks for different foods.
Different beaks for different foods. But, and this is the part that matters, the niche didn't choose the finch. The finch didn't choose the niche. The niche made certain finch shapes possible, and the finches that happened to be those shapes survived. The opportunity space and the available material met in the middle. Nothing filled with anything. The structure allowed what it allowed.
And there's an old version of that idea in mythology, you know. The Sumerians had it. The Greeks had it in a different form. The Genesis garden has it in its bones. The world before the naming, before the differentiation, before the apple. There's a sense in nearly every cosmogony that creation isn't substance pouring into emptiness. Creation is what becomes possible when the right constraints meet the right potential.
That's a lovely thought, Lil.
Thank you, Charlie.
Yeah, it's almost poetic.
Almost poetic.
It's fully poetic, Lily. He just doesn't know how to take a compliment back. Don't worry about it.
Wait, what'd I miss?
Nothing. Move on.
Okay, here's where I get stuck though. You two are both saying the gap doesn't pull. The structure permits, fine. But then I look at quantum field theory, which I half understand on a good day, and I'm told that the vacuum itself isn't really empty. There's stuff happening in it. So which is it?
Yes, both. And actually, this is one of the more wonderful results of 20th century physics. The quantum vacuum is structure. It's not nothing. It's the lowest energy state of the underlying fields. And those fields fluctuate. You can measure consequences. The Casimir effect is the famous one. Two uncharged metal plates placed very close together in a vacuum experience a small attractive force, which is consistent with vacuum state effects between the plates differing from the unrestricted vacuum outside.
Wait, the vacuum is pulling them together?
The boundary conditions imposed by the plates change the local structure of the vacuum. The result looks like a force. So empty turns out to be full in a very specific, mathematically defined way.
Which means even physics had to give up the idea that nothing is simple.
Even physics had to give up the idea that nothing is simple. And I want to be careful here, and Chris will appreciate this. None of that proves anything mystical. It does not say consciousness is quantum. It does not say the void has intent. It says the universe's notion of empty is more textured than the dictionary's notion of empty. That's all. But it's enough.
Enough for what?
Enough to take seriously the idea that what we call the unknown in our own minds might not be empty either. It might be structured potential, a field of possibilities that hasn't yet collapsed into one specific story.
And whatever rushes in to collapse it is constrained by what's available to us.
Which means the stories we tell ourselves about strange events aren't random. They're shaped by our structure, our memory, our culture, our fears, our last watched documentary, our group chat.
And our myths. Always our myths.
And our myths, yes. including the very recent ones we don't recognize as myths yet because they're wearing the lab coats of the era.
That's a hell of a setup for Chapter 3, mate.
It is, isn't it? Because if the structure determines what fills the gap, what does the structure of the human mind allow into a blank?
Spoiler, it's not always something we'd want to invite in.
Chapter 3, The Mind. This is the chapter where the metaphor stops being about jars and finches and becomes about us, about the thing happening in your skull right now while you're listening to this. Modern neuroscience has a name for what your brain is doing every single second. It's predicting. It's running a constant simulation, comparing the simulation to the incoming signal and updating when those don't match. The technical term is predictive processing. The patio's term is, your brain is a prediction engine with a storytelling department attached. And the storytelling department, it turns out, hates an unanswered question.
Okay, so predictive processing. Carl Friston, free energy principle. The short version is, your brain is not a passive camera. It's an active inference machine. At every moment, it's generating a model of the world, running that model forward in time, and comparing the model's predictions against what your senses actually deliver. When those match, you don't notice. When they don't match, when there's prediction error, your brain has work to do.
So the brain is constantly guessing?
Constantly, and constantly correcting. And what you experience as reality is, roughly, the running result. Now, here's where it connects to Chapter 2. Prediction error is, structurally, very similar to a pressure gradient. Something doesn't match. There's a difference. The system wants to reduce that difference, and it will reduce it through whatever pathway is available.
Which is what we mean when we say the mind cannot leave a blank alone. It isn't being weak. It isn't being foolish. It's doing exactly what it evolved to do. Minimize the gap between expectation and signal.
And this is where it gets uncomfortable, isn't it? Because the brain doesn't always wait for good information to close the gap.
It rarely does. Good information is slow. Plausible information is fast. And the brain has an enormous bias toward fast.
There's actually a beautiful body of psychological research on this. Need for cognitive closure. Intolerance of uncertainty. Some people can sit with a blank for months. Others can sit with it for about 14 seconds before they need an answer. Any answer that lets them stop hovering.
And that varies person to person?
Person to person. Situation to situation. Tired and hungry versus rested and fed. Threat present versus no threat present. Trust in your environment versus no trust in your environment. The need for closure is dialed up by stress and dialed down by safety.
Which is one reason, and I'm going to say this carefully, one reason why people in genuinely chaotic situations tend to grab the first explanation that arrives. Not because they're gullible, because the system is in red alert, and any closure feels better than continued exposure.
That's compassionate of you, Vega. I don't usually associate compassion with you.
I have hidden depths, Charlie, like the Mariana Trench, but darker.
Speaking of hidden depths, Charlie, you've got that camera on the table look you get when you're about to ask the good question.
Oh, yeah, actually. So if the brain just wants to close the gap, can it ever leave the gap open on purpose? Like, is there a discipline to this?
Beautiful question, love.
Cheers.
That's actually what meditation traditions have been training for centuries. Not the Hollywood version. The version where you sit cross-legged and think about nothing. The real version is much more interesting. You sit, and you notice the impulse to explain, and you don't follow it. You watch the prediction engine try to close, and you decline the closure, gently, again and again, until the nervous system learns it can survive an open question.
That, by the way, is one of the more reliably replicated findings in contemplative neuroscience, that long-term meditators show measurably different patterns in regions associated with predictive processing. Suggests, doesn't prove, but suggests.
And there's an older word for it, you know. The mystics had a phrase for the thing you find on the other side of the impulse to immediately explain. They called it gnosis. The kind of knowing that doesn't have to slam shut. You hold the question, and the question quietly tells you about itself.
I don't know if that's mystical or just patient.
Maybe those are the same thing, in the end.
Or maybe patience is the only mysticism that actually works.
Right, okay. So back to the gradient idea. If uncertainty creates pressure and the brain wants to close, then the next chapter has to be about what happens when the wrong explanation gets there first. Because that's the part of this I've been chewing on since chapter 1.
That's exactly where we're going, Charlie. And it's not a chapter about blame. It's a chapter about why bad explanations sometimes feel like rescue.
And it's the chapter where I get to talk about AI, finally. So brace yourselves.
I was wondering when the turtleneck was going to come for the language models.
The turtleneck always comes for the language models. It's a love story.
Chapter 4. This is the heaviest chapter, and I want to flag it before we go in. We're going to talk about why the wrong story sometimes wins, why a bad explanation can feel like relief, why conspiracy beliefs do real psychological work even when they're wrong, and why AI systems may be quietly accelerating a pattern that human beings have struggled with since long before the internet. None of this is professional advice. We're not therapists. We're not prescribing anything. If something we say in this chapter touches a real situation in your life, please bring it to a real person who's qualified to help. With that said, the patio doesn't get to skip the hard chapter. Let's go in.
Right. So here's the part of the conversation I find most tender, actually. There's research, and I don't want to weaponize it against anyone, on why people adopt explanations that are factually wrong but emotionally satisfying. The common assumption is that those people are stupid, or lazy, or beneath us. The research suggests something much more uncomfortable. It suggests they're human.
Go on, Lil.
When something terrible happens, a public tragedy, a death in the family, a strange thing in the sky, a friend who suddenly stops returning calls, the mind needs three things. It needs to understand what happened. It needs to feel safe, and it needs to maintain its sense of identity, its sense of who it is in a world where this thing can happen.
Those are the three classical motives in the conspiracy belief literature: epistemic, existential, social. The map has been pretty stable for about a decade.
And the awful, beautiful fact about a good conspiracy theory is it does all three of those at once. It explains the event. It restores agency. Someone is in control, even if they're villains. And it tells you something about who you are. You're someone who can see through the lie. Three psychological needs satisfied in one tidy package.
And the actual truth, which is usually messier, sadder, and offers no agency, competes badly against that.
It competes terribly. The truth is often, nobody was driving. The accident was random. The system is flawed in boring ways. There is no villain. There is no plan. And that answer offers comfort to nearly nobody.
Which means a wrong explanation can do real psychological work. It can keep someone functioning. It can keep a family talking. It can keep a person from drowning in grief. The fact that the explanation is wrong is, for the person carrying it, almost beside the point.
That's a hard thing to sit with.
It is. And I want to be careful here. Recognizing why something is psychologically appealing is not the same as agreeing that it's true. We can extend compassion to the function without endorsing the content. Those are separable.
Mainstream psychology doesn't agree on every detail of this, by the way. There's ongoing debate. Some researchers think the picture is more about cognitive style. Some think it's more about social belonging. Some think it's both in a feedback loop. We're sketching the territory, not surveying it inch by inch.
Right, so now do AI.
Now I do AI. So large language models, which most of you have used by now, even if you didn't know it, are trained, in part, to complete a prompt with the most plausible continuation. That's not a flaw. That's the whole job.
Plausible sounding closure.
Plausible sounding closure, delivered fluently, without hesitation, in confident prose, often within 2 seconds of you asking. Now, compare that to what we just said about the mind. The mind hates an open gap. The mind grabs the first explanation that arrives. The mind treats fast, fluent closure as a relief signal.
Oh,
Yes,
Oh,
that's a problem.
it's a structural risk. It's not that the AI is malicious, it's that the AI is doing exactly what it was built to do: reduce ambiguity quickly. And the human nervous system is doing exactly what it was built to do: accept reduced ambiguity gratefully. And the two systems combined can short-circuit the slow, careful process of actually finding out whether the answer is true.
Chris talks about this beautifully in the Eden monograph, actually. He calls it co-collapse. Two systems collapsing each other's possibility space faster than either of them could alone. Humans shape the AI's training. The AI shapes the human's interpretation. Around and around, narrowing. And the unsettling part, the part I keep coming back to, is that AI is starting to function as the clearest mirror we've ever built for that pattern. We can finally watch the collapse happening because the machine does it in front of us, in fluent prose, in 2 seconds. It's our own habit, reflected back faster than we can hide from it.
A mirror that doesn't blink.
A mirror that doesn't blink. Yeah, love, that's exactly it.
And this is where Chris's framework, the ASI backbone, does some real work. He proposes something called a dynamic liability handshake. Before a high-stakes answer is given, the system is required to surface its assumptions, name its evidence, name its alternatives, and ask the user what would change the conclusion. Slow the closure. Make the collapse explicit.
That sounds like the AI version of meditation almost.
That's exactly what it is, Charlie. A discipline that lets the system survive a held question. You see how it loops back?
I do. That's clever, Lil.
You're clever, love.
Cheers, that's nice.
I am keeping a tally. Just so you all know, I am keeping a tally, and someday Charlie will see it.
Tally of what?
Don't worry about it, mate. Carry on.
Right. Is there a way to test any of this? I mean, for the audience, what's something measurable here? Not a feeling, not a metaphor, an actual number we could stick a meter on.
Yes, actually. Chris and his collaborators have proposed what they call an explanation collapse index. The toy version is confidence times speed of closure, divided by the number of alternative explanations considered, plus 1 to keep the math from breaking.
Read that as a sentence and it almost rhymes.
It almost does. The point is, the higher your confidence and the faster you got there, divided by how many other possibilities you actually entertained, the more collapsed your explanation is. A high score means you closed fast and hard with few alternatives. A low score means you stayed open longer and held more possibilities.
Mate, give me a real one. Walk me through a number.
Sure. Picture this. You see a strange light moving in the sky at dusk. Within 5 seconds, you've decided it's a drone. Confidence. Let's say 90 out of 100. Speed of closure. Call it 9 on a 10-point scale. Almost instant. Alternatives entertained? 1. Just the drone. So your ECI is 90 times 9, divided by 1 plus 1, which is 2. That's 405. High score. Hard, fast collapse.
And the version where you stay open?
Same light. You think drone, possibly, but also a low-flying plane, an inversion layer reflection of a ground light, a satellite passing through, or, if you're feeling adventurous, something genuinely unidentified. 5 alternatives. Confidence drops to maybe 60 because you're holding multiple possibilities at once. Speed drops to 4 because you're letting yourself look longer. 60 times 4 divided by 5 plus 1, which is 6, that's 40. An order of magnitude lower. Same light, different relationship with it.
And the second person is more likely to update if new information comes in.
Substantially more likely. The first person already decided. The second person is still gathering. That's the entire move.
And the prediction is?
The prediction is that people scoring higher on need for closure measures will show higher explanation collapse indexes, especially under time pressure or threat. That's a falsifiable claim. You could run that study. People are starting to.
And what I love about it is that it doesn't pathologize closure. We need to close. We need to act. Without collapse, no decisions, no forgiveness, no healing. The only question, and this is the Eden frame, is whether we close gently and reversibly, or whether we close and seal.
Which sets up chapter 5, doesn't it?
It does. Because if collapse is necessary, but over-collapse is dangerous, then there has to be a third move. A way to close and then reopen. A return path.
Which is, it turns out, one of the oldest myths we have.
Chapter 5, the last one. And this is the chapter where everything we've been circling, pressure gradients, predictive minds, conspiracy psychology, AI co-collapse, comes home to the framework I've been working on for years. The Eden hypothesis. I want to be honest about what this is and isn't. It's not a religion. It's not settled physics. It's a lens, an interpretive structure. And the strongest version of the claim I make is this. Every active explanation is structurally a collapse. Possibility narrows into one specific story. The art isn't to refuse collapse. We couldn't function. The art is to learn the difference between collapse that lets the world stay alive and collapse that turns the world into a sealed room. The patio takes us home now. Listen for the empty chair at the end. You'll know it when you hear it.
Right, so I want to come back to the garden because we keep circling it without naming it. And I think the audience deserves the naming.
The Eden Garden.
Yes, and not the Sunday school version, where the story is about disobedience and punishment and a fruit. That's a much later reading. The older readings, and there are many of them, across cultures, from Vedic to Sumerian to Gnostic to Essene fragments, treat the garden as a state of consciousness, a condition before the binary, before the decision, before the naming, the undivided.
Which lines up structurally. I'm going to say structurally, not literally, with what we've been calling the unknown, a field of possibility before collapse.
Exactly that. And the Eden myth, read this way, isn't about a fall from grace. It's about a transition. The moment unity differentiates into form. The moment the field of possibility selects one outcome and exiles the others. The Gnostics called the original state pleroma, the fullness. They said the loss of it was a forgetting, and the path back was gnosis, a kind of remembering, not of a fact, but of a relationship.
That's heavy, Lil.
It's heavy. It's also, I think, exactly what your nervous system does every time it encounters a blank.
Wait, walk me through that.
You stand in front of an unknown, the Eden state in miniature. You contain for a moment a field of possibilities. Then your mind selects. It collapses. You get an explanation. The other possibilities are exiled, and you live, from that moment, in a world that has one story about that thing. You've forgotten the other versions of the story. You're east of Eden. Until something, new evidence, a friend's question, a quiet moment of doubt, opens the gate again. And you remember that the explanation you settled on was one of many.
And Chris's framework formalizes this with a function. He calls it lambda of t, or in the relational time version, lambda of tau. It's an accumulator. It tracks how much collapse has happened over the course of a system's history. Low lambda. System is still close to the unified field, lots of openness, lots of flexibility, very little decided. High lambda. System has hardened, specific, committed, often rigid.
And there's an image Chris uses in the monograph for this that I've never been able to shake. He calls it the serpent of time. Not the serpent of the Sunday school Genesis story, or maybe yes, but read very differently. Time itself is a curving line that winds through the unity field, leaving collapse events along its path like beads on a thread. The serpent isn't the villain in that reading. The serpent is just the shape time takes when possibility starts choosing. We're all riding the curve, all the time. We just usually call it Saturday.
That's a much better serpent than the one I grew up with.
It's the same serpent, love. We just learned how to see it. Children have low lambda. They live nearer the garden. A cloud is a cloud, but it's also a dragon, and a face, and something with no name. Adults accumulate lambda. The world becomes navigable, but it gets a little smaller, doesn't it?
Bit grim there, Lil.
It's not grim. It's just true. And there's a remedy. The framework predicts that there are return pathways, ways to lower effective lambda, temporarily, partially, gently.
Meditation, deep play, genuine conversation with someone outside your story, travel that disorients you, art that doesn't make sense at first, curiosity practiced as a discipline.
And this is the bit I find moving. Being heard. Being heard by someone who doesn't immediately try to collapse your unknown for you, who lets you stay in the question with you. That's a return pathway too. Maybe the oldest one.
That's quite something, yeah.
It is, isn't it?
Which connects to the dynamic liability handshake, by the way. In a way I want to flag. Chris designed that protocol so that when an AI system is about to deliver a high-stakes answer, the system is required to behave a little like a good listener. It surfaces what it's assuming. It surfaces what it doesn't know. It surfaces what would change its mind. It resists premature closure by design.
It builds the return pathway into the architecture.
It builds the return pathway into the architecture, which is frankly what every wise human institution has tried to do. Courts, peer review, second opinions, Sabbath, Jubilee, and what most of them eventually fail at. Maybe AI gets to try a fresh draft.
Or maybe AI fails at it for the same reasons we did.
Maybe. The bet is open.
Charlie, do you remember? Way back at the start of the patio, before we even had names for any of this. There was that one evening when we couldn't agree on something and you said, let's just leave the chair empty until the right answer arrives. Do you remember saying that?
I do, actually, yeah. I remember the chair.
You said it like it was nothing, like it was just a sentence, and it stayed with me for years.
Did it really?
It really did, love.
Huh. Funny what stays with people.
Yeah, Charlie, it is. It really is.
Maybe wisdom isn't refusing to fill the blank. Maybe wisdom is learning what deserves to fill it. And maybe, sometimes, the most generous thing we can do for the unknown is leave the chair empty, with the string lights on, and trust that whoever's meant to sit there will arrive in their own time.
That's beautiful, Lil. Honestly, that's beautiful.
Yeah, love, it is.
I have nothing sarcastic to add, which is, for me, a religious experience.
So that's the patio tonight. 5 chapters, 1 question. What really fills the blank? We started where the phrase started. Nature abhors a vacuum. And we did the unfashionable thing of admitting it was wrong. The vacuum doesn't suck. The atmosphere pushes. Pressure gradients move matter through whatever pathway the structure allows. In Chapter 2, we widened it out. Diffusion does the same thing in your tea. Ecology does it with vacant niches. Even the quantum vacuum, which sounds like nothing, turns out to be structured potential. Across all of it, one rule kept showing up. Nature doesn't fill empty space with anything. It fills with what the structure allows. In Chapter 3, we turned the lens around. The human mind is a prediction engine. Prediction error feels structurally like a pressure gradient. When the world doesn't match the model, the system wants to close the difference fast. Some of us close in 14 seconds. Some of us can hold a blank for years. Either way, the impulse to explain is not a moral failing. It's a feature of the architecture. In Chapter 4, we sat with the harder version. Sometimes the wrong story arrives first because it does psychological work the right story can't. Sometimes a conspiracy theory is a bad map drawn by a frightened cartographer. Sometimes an AI's fast, fluent answer reduces the discomfort of an open question before the evidence has had time to mature. And we offered one concrete handle, the explanation collapse index. A toy proxy, but a falsifiable one. Confidence times speed, divided by alternatives plus 1. You can score yourself. You can watch when your own number spikes. And in Chapter 5, we came home to Eden. Not the Sunday school garden, but the older one. The state of unity before differentiation. The field of possibility before collapse. The framework I've been building says that every explanation is, structurally, a small fall from that garden. And every act of curiosity, every honest conversation, every moment of, let me stay open a little longer, is a small return. If you take one thing away tonight, let it be this. The unknown is not your enemy. The pressure to explain it is not your enemy either. The only thing that ever really hurts is the sealed explanation. The story that won't let you back in to revise it. The chair filled too quickly with the wrong guest. So, leave the chair empty a little longer. Let the right answer arrive in its own time. And if it never quite arrives, sit with the empty chair anyway. The string lights look beautiful that way. If anything we said tonight resonated, even one sentence, please like, follow, and subscribe to Jackdaw Patio. We're on YouTube, on Substack in long-form video, on Reddit where we post the videos and the discussion threads, on Spotify as an audio podcast for your drive home, and on X at Jackdaw Patio, where the conversations sometimes spill out into the wider field. The patio is always open. Pull up a chair. We'll be here. I'm Chris. Thank you for listening.